a disturbing picture tonight of a Department of Justice official's bizarre ties to the author of the anti-Trump dossier, raising new questions about why they were talking to each other at all and what impact it had on triggering the Russia probe. Good evening, everybody. I'm Martha McCallum. Good to be back here in New York with you tonight. The emails reportedly reveal that Christopher Steele was keeping in touch with top DOJ official Bruce Ohr as he was compiling the dossier. In fact, the two met several times during the dossier's creation. And at one point, as a sidebar, Steele was lobbying Ohr on behalf of a Russian oligarch trying to gain entry for him to the United States. So if the name Bruce Ohr sounds familiar as you've followed this whole story with us along the way, it's because at the end of last year, he was demoted at DOJ, didn't lose his job, he was demoted amid an ongoing investigation into his contacts with Steele and Fusion GPS, where his wife worked. Lots to dive into on that story tonight. Also this evening, the reportedly softening relationship between Rod Rosenstein and President Trump. And another intriguing story is Hope Hicks coming back to the White House. We will get to all that, but first we begin with Ed Henry, live at the White House with the backstory on the dossier bombshell. Good to see you tonight, Ed.
Martha, great to see you. What a tangled web they were weaving. People associated with that opposition research firm, Fusion GPS, that was hired by Hillary Clinton's campaign and the DNC to dig up dirt on President Trump and Russia. It turns out that people associated with that firm were actually working to go to bat for a Russian oligarch. As you mentioned, at the middle of all of this is that Justice Department official, Bruce Ohr. He was in close contact with the former British spy, Christopher Steele, who was putting together the dossier for Fusion GPS, alleging that the president's team was colluding with the Russians. But as you noted, this new correspondence obtained by the Hill newspaper shows Steele himself was lobbying Ohr to help the Russian oligarch Oleg Deripaska get a visa. Now, Deripaska was blocked from traveling to the U.S. more than a decade ago because of suspected ties to Russian mob leaders. In February 2016, before the election, Steele emailed Ohr that the oligarch had gotten a visa and added, quote, "It would be helpful if you could monitor it and let me know if any complications arise." Ohr at Justice responded, "To the extent I can, I will keep an eye on the situation." Significant in part because under questioning from Republican Senator Tom Cotton earlier this year, the FBI Director Christopher Wray testified he could only discuss that connection in a classified setting. Listen.
Do you know if Christopher Steele worked for Oleg Deripaska?
That's not something I can answer.
Now, remember as well that Ohr's wife, Nellie, was on the payroll of Fusion GPS. Fox News contributor Byron York is reporting in the Washington Examiner that Ohr's logs show he and his wife met with Steele for breakfast on July 30th, 2016. Interesting timing, because Steele finished different pieces of that dossier on July 19th and July 26th, right before the breakfast. Then, right before the election, on the morning of October 18th, Steele had pressing business with Bruce Ohr, emailing, quote, "If you're in Washington today, I have something quite urgent I would like to discuss with you, preferably by Skype, even before work if you can." Now, Ohr said they should connect right away. Steele wrote back, "Thanks, Bruce, 2 minutes." That same day, October 18th, Steele finished another installment of the dossier that went after former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page for alleged ties to Russia. Then on October 19th and 20th, there were more installments of the dossier zeroing in on allegations against Paul Manafort. The bottom line is all of these strands suggest that as the president has been tweeting in recent days, that there may have been collusion or connections on the other side of all of this dealing with Russia that have simply not been investigated yet, Martha.
Ed, thank you very much. So here now with more on this, Brian Lanza, who is the former communications director for President Trump's transition team. He is now the managing director of Mercury lobbying firm, which currently does work for an independent board member of Oleg Deripaska's energy company. Also tonight, joining me, Mo Alithi, former Democratic National Committee spokesperson and executive director of Georgetown Institutes of Politics, and he is also a Fox News contributor. Gentlemen, welcome. Good to see both of you tonight. Mo, I want to start with you. Does that disturb you, the story that Ed laid out?
I mean, look, it is a convoluted story, and I don't really...
What's convoluted about it?
There's a lot of twists and turns in this thing, just as there has been with every step of this investigation from the beginning. So, are there questions to be asked? Sure. Should we look into them? Sure. Should we use this as an effort to discount the bigger investigation that's going on? Absolutely not. I think.
But let me just ask you one of the basic questions here, which is, does it concern you that a member of the Department of Justice who was a deputy to Rod Rosenstein, or to Loretta Lynch at the time, does it disturb you that he would have had a constant talking relationship while Christopher Steele was doing the dossier, and his wife, meanwhile, was working for Fusion GPS, who was also involved in putting together the dossier? Does that bother you?
My understanding is at the time, Christopher Steele was still on the FBI payroll. If my reading of the story and the sequence of events.
I believe he had been fired by then.
He'd been fired for lying and leaking.
At the time of
leaking to the press. Yeah.
My understanding was that the relationship went way back.
Well, the relationship goes all the way up to the election, because they're still talking before the election and, in fact, right after.
Yeah. So look, there's a lot of questions that I think are worth asking, but I don't think it's going to be. I think there are a lot of people that are going to try to use this as further fuel to try to discredit the bigger investigation.
But wouldn't you want? Let me just stick with Mo for a second, then I'm going to get to Brian. But wouldn't you want to know, if you're very interested, as I assume you are, in whether or not there was collusion between either campaign and Russia, then the answer to these questions would be very important, because the question that Senator Tom Cotton asked was Oleg Deripaska paying Christopher Steele to work on his behalf? Now, he is also someone who is suspected of potentially being one of the sources for the dossier. So would you consider that a form of concern, or potentially even something that might suggest that there was collusion?
I have always said, Martha, and you know this, having been on your show many, many times, that I want investigation to play out. I want people to stop trying to shut down the investigation and any questions that come of it, regardless of what direction it goes. And I think that's the difference between some of us and some on the other side that say we should just shut it all down. Let's let this thing play out and see where it takes us.
Okay. Now, Brian, we need to clear up what you do, because you used to be a Trump communications director. And now you're involved with a firm that is trying to help lift the sanctions against the firm that Oleg Deripaska, his Russian firm, is working with and involved with. But you're not representing him personally? Can you clear that up?
Correct. Yeah, basically what I do is I work for, Lord Greg Barker, who's an independent board member of EM Plus, who's under sanctions, and EM Plus is trying to shed, along with the board member, Lord Parker, we're trying to shed Deripaska from the company's leadership and from the company's board.
So if you can remove Deripaska from the company, then you're hoping that this company will get some sanctions relief. Is that true?
Well, according to the sanctions that were listed, if those two things take place, the U.S. government will lift sanctions.
Possible. Is considered to be considered.
Well, that's
now,
the benchmark that they set.
People at home, this story is very complicated, as Mo said, and it's true. It is. Oleg Deripaska is not, somebody that most people are familiar with. So he was obviously had some kind of relationship with Christopher Steele, who put together the dossier. He also had some kind of relationship with Paul Manafort, who was the campaign manager of the Trump campaign, I believe, when you were there. What do people need to understand about this guy?
I don't know a lot about him. What I do know is that, his relationship with Chris Steele brings a lot of cause and concern. I mean, if you look at what the Clinton campaign did, they hired a foreign agent in Chris Steele to make contacts with his Russian government contacts and his Russian friends, which is Oleg Deripaska and the Russian government. I mean, that gives me concern, because that says interference. That says conspiracy to interfere in an American election by foreign agents, A, this British national, and B, these Russian officials that he claimed to get this information from. And to put dissent and sow dissent inside our political arena, and I think that should cause a lot of people concern.
But he also had a relationship with Paul Manafort, who was the campaign manager.
Sure. I mean, what his relationship with Paul is his relationship. I have no context or any idea what that relationship is.
And this guy's obviously had his hand in a lot of different different pots on both sides of the fence, and we need to learn a lot more about that. Let me just swing forward to a couple of other quick topics here. Rod Rosenstein and the president, Mo, apparently there's been a softening in that relationship. The reports are that they talk several times a week. What do you make of that, and is that significant?
Look, if the president is stopped trying to get Rod Rosenstein fired, or talking about that, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Look, I think it shows how transactional the president is when Rod Rosenstein gives him does things that he likes. He will praise him. When he does things that he doesn't like not shutting down this investigation, he goes after him. I mean, just this morning he went after once again the witch hunt that Rod Rosenstein is apparently not shutting down for him. So I think it's a transactional thing. But if there's a slowing down of the war on Rosenstein and the DOJ, then that's a good thing.
Yeah, Brian, there's a report that the White House is not in favor of the Republican leaders in the House who are trying to subpoena Rod Rosenstein. That that perhaps they're discouraging that and sort of having a better relationship with him, as I said.
I think if you look, the president has always said he wants this investigation to go forward. He's made his staff available to answer as many questions as possible. They've turned in over millions of documents. I think what the president wants is a speedy resolution to this investigation, and his frustration with the Deputy Attorney General is that he feels the process isn't going fast enough. I mean, from our perspective, you've interviewed everybody, you've reviewed all the documents, you see everybody's emails. Let's come to a resolution. I think you hear Mayor Rudy Giuliani talking about this thing being resolved soon. I think we've had enough time. People have seen enough underneath all these rocks to come up with a conclusion, and let's get there already.
Just a few seconds left, Brian, and the question's for you. Hope Hicks, do you expect that she will rejoin the Trump campaign or the Trump White House in either capacity?
I think the White House and the campaign would be lucky to have her. As somebody who worked alongside Hope, I think she's an added value to any organization she's going to be a part of, specifically this administration with her understanding of the president and how he views the media. It was a loss when she left, and if and when she returns, it'll be a tremendous gain for this administration and campaign.
Reports are that she's been talking to a lot of high-level operations, some on Wall Street and some in other places in New York City that would like to have her probably work for them as well. So we'll see what happens with that.
She'll succeed at anything she touches.
Brian Lanza, thank you. Mo Alithi, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Good to see you both.